Hello, I'm Lucy Rees. I'd like to say welcome to this conference, but of course it's not really a conference, it's a series of talks online because of, well, we know the problem. What the conference organisers have done is send me a series of questions which I'll try to answer in my own way. Well, of course, we started off in the same place with little creatures like this that were the only mammalian survivors of the cataclysm that killed the dinosaurs, amongst an awful lot of other things too. Later mammals went adapting this original form according to the ways of life that they found open to them. So our ground plan is the same. Backbone, 4 limbs, 5 digits, heart, lungs, liver, live young, so on. Our muscles, tendons and ligaments are actually the same tissue. So if you treat a horse as if it was your own, you won't go far wrong. But our ancestors took the trees, and there's the grassy plains, so adaptations differ. Modifying a front foot for grasping is a great idea for trees, but it's pretty lousy for running across plains, where you want to reduce the weight of the limb and have a hard toe that doesn't wear out. So although horses' feet and ours look completely different, they're both variations on the same essential theme. So are our digestive systems, but ours is adapted to an omnivorous diet and theirs to a herbivorous one. So you can't actually treat a horse's digestion as if it was your own. Like 2 meals a day, it's not going to survive. And then there's the nervous system, which is my interest because it drives behaviour. It's the same ground plan again, but what we see during evolution isn't so much adaptation, although there is some. What's more striking is the way that bits got added on, mostly to the front and to the sides of the brain. And they're mostly to do with the animal getting gradually more control over its life, not just reacting to what there is. So we have simple things like reflexes, same as horses, which protect the body against something that comes at the moment, and they also help you walk around and things. We also have bits at the back of the brain that are to do with automatic control of keeping your body homeostasis, keeping the breathing, heartbeat, water content, nutrient content, all those sorts of things which you don't want to have to think about. Also, those come from reptiles. But where mammals made a great step forward was in developing an emotional system, which motivates them to seek out or even create conditions favourable to survival. Solving survival problems before they actually arrive, instead of just reacting. To be an active agent in their own destiny. Often these solutions depend on social life, which reptiles aren't great at, but mammals are. On top of that emotional part, and informed by it, come improved learning systems to predict what might happen because of what happened before. And on top of that is an analytical and thinking system, the neocortex, that reaches its fullest elaboration in us humans. This is a human brain from below, and you can see how the neocortex has grown like a mushroom until it overhangs all the rest of the brain. This gave us tremendous analytical, logical planning abilities that horses don't really share. Though we do share the same basic emotional system, the motivators, and even the same basic ways of learning. Well, horses aren't bad at figuring out solutions too, even if their rocket science and writing symphonies is a bit beyond them. But what are emotions? They're states of mind that affect how an animal perceives and behaves. They're guidelines to survival. Go for that, don't go for that. Exactly how it behaves depends again on adaptation to a particular way of life, so they form the basis of what we call instinctive behaviour. They also feed up to the learning and analytical layers, which in turn can feed down to modify them. And in us, promote often endless cogitation, turning things over, wondering about things, complicating things. But basic emotions, simple basic emotions, are common to all mammals, and they're subcortical. You can take off an animal's cortex and it'll still show the same emotional behaviour. It doesn't have anything to do with thinking. Whether they feel the same as we do is a moot point, since we don't even know whether other people feel the same as we do. But other animals, like horses, certainly experience emotions and are conscious of them. Jack Panksepp drew together evidence from all sorts of ways investigating emotion. Neuroanatomy, neurochemistry, playing around with drugs, behaviour, psychiatry, MRI, PET scans, all those, lots of ways of looking at it. And to form what he called affective neuroscience. He found that all mammals share at least 7 basic emotional circuits that are anatomically and biochemically distinct. But they do interact. In rats, you can put a tiny electrode in one of these circuits and stimulate it, and you get a full thing of emotional behaviour. You can also teach the rat to stimulate itself by pressing a bar, so that you can tell whether it likes that emotion, whether it goes on pressing the bar, or whether it doesn't. So they are conscious of their feelings, and this was one of the great bases of saying that animals are conscious. That level of animal is conscious. They are conscious of their feelings, and they do feel them. And they don't like some feelings, some emotions. Panksepp put the names of these in capital letters, just to show that they're ordinary words. He's not using them in a very ordinary way. He means anatomical and biochemical entities. And he called the first and the greatest of these, he called seek. It's highly positive, rats love it. It's what makes an animal want to find out about the world, to engage with it, to get out there and do things, explore, investigate. And with luck, you're going to find something good in it as well. So it incorporates what are called reinforcement centres or reward centres. But actually, the emotion itself is its own reward. It's important to realise that. It's like good to be alive feeling, healthy enjoyment of life that doesn't really need more than just itself. Years ago, I think it was called general drive, more or less. Homeostatic needs, hunger and thirst and things, plug into that to make the animal go and look for what it is that needs to satisfy them. And other emotions do too. Of course, Depression is the total lack of expression of that emotion. Failure of motivation. Failure of finding pleasure in anything. Thanks mainly to investigators in Rennes, headed by Martin Hausberger, we now know that horses, a lot of horses, especially in riding schools, exhibit very clear symptoms of depression. Why? Because they aren't ever allowed to activate their seek system. They're not allowed to investigate or explore or choose anything for themselves. Everything's handed on a plate or demanded. So this circuit gradually shuts down. You can train them mechanically by applying uncomfortable pressures or giving them bits of carrot in a very mechanical way, but they don't have any motivation. There's no shine in the eyes. There's no what should we do today feeling. No fun in it. But since they are completely devoid of their own will, it suits some people, especially rather frightened ones. The opposite, of course, when it's overstimulated or it doesn't find an outlet, is obsession, obsessive behaviour, drug addictive behaviour, or stereotypic behaviour in horses. A second positive emotion is play. He called play. It's also joy, having fun in company. It's social. In young mammals, it's the basis of learning about each other, getting skilled at communicating, and it's a great basis of friendship. Huge part of natural social development. It's often undeveloped in young domestic horses because of the way they're brought up. And often, in consequence, they grow up socially inept. They can't get on with other horses, although they want to. They don't know how. Now, play is the basis of modern dog training. Enlightened dog trainers use structured play in training, since, again, it's its own reward, and also we like pleasure in our friends. We like creating pleasure in our friends. Animals do the same. We can use play circuits with horses more than people have thought. It doesn't have to be rough play like colts do. They love synchronous play. And that can be a wonderful way of creating friendships and learning too. Third positive emotional circuit is care. What do you call care? Which of course they need because they suckle their young, and mammals are pretty inadequate as young. It's also present in any nurturing, protective, kind relationship. And again, friendship. We don't like seeing our friends suffer. We see it also in stallions' bonds with their foals. It's part of empathy, in a way. It gives rise to empathy. Horses respond very strongly to tenderness in the way they're groomed, in the way they're handled, in the way that we do anything with them, to the feeling that they're being cared for. The opposite of care is a highly negative emotion called separation distress, which for short Panksepp called panic, which also incorporates loneliness, sorrow, grief, in us pain of being rejected, sadness. It obviously gives rise to depression. Care and panic are completely opposed. It's shown that if you stimulate panic or separation distress strongly very early in life, this has a lasting and indeed increasing effect on cognitive function. You actually damage any capacity to think. So that does raise a question of, since being in company is so important to horses' survival, what does stressful weaning in early life do to them? Does that damage their cognitive functions too? I don't know whether anybody's really looked at that. Another positive emotion is lust or sexual desire, but for lack of time I'll pass over that because it doesn't really enter into our relationships with horses. Now, the really negative emotions are rage and fear, which rats will do anything to avoid, any animal will. Fear, of course, is easily motivated in horses, as it is in us. And especially in us, anxiety, which is its toned down form. Care opposes that, it alleviates it. When a horse is taught to come to us instead of running away when it's afraid, he very rapidly chooses the positive emotion and not the fear that's also engendered by the act of running away. But fear is far too prevalent in our dealings with horses. We tend to train by putting uncomfortable, unpleasant, and what end up painful pressures on them. And of course, fear's a way of predicting and avoiding pain. Do we actually have to get to provoking that to train a horse? If they can't avoid it, they tend to get, again, very depressed. But another possible outcome is rage, which is often provoked by unavoidable pain or unavoidable fear. Destroy that before it destroys you. So rage incorporates anger, more usually call it aggression in horses. And both people and horses get far more aggressive and bad-tempered when they're afraid. Horses usually do it because they want to get away, and people usually get afraid because they're frightened of losing control, which is the opposite. Frustration is another huge source of anger, and far too many horses experience frustration absolutely constantly because of the way they're kept. But although those basic emotions are common to us and horses, our huge cognitive neocortex, with that extra prefrontal lobe on top, which is the executive part, do you follow this emotion? Do you act on this emotion, or do you not act on it? They don't have. And we do elaborate extra emotions that horses probably don't share. We compound fear of social rejection to produce shame or guilt, or feeling afraid of being a fool. Or we mix those even further with frustrated rage to produce envy or revenge. They don't seem to do that. They're simpler. If you're talking about welfare, and this is a welfare conference, understanding these shared basic emotions is a huge help to understanding what real positive welfare is. We are getting slightly better at defining what ill-fare is and knowing how to avoid it, but what is positive well-being? It's enjoying life. It's a question of activating the circuits of positive, enjoyed emotions, which are seek, play and care, and minimising fear, rage and panic. And I'm afraid we tend to do it the other way around. This activation of positive emotions leads to cognitive appreciation of life, to optimism, to collaboration from a horse with us. What are we going to do today together? Because we always have a good time doing it. Even when sometimes you have to say, no, that's beyond social norms. The rest of it is just, let's do it together and let's have fun. You don't tread on your friend's toes either. It's all right. Yeah. It's not just giving them carrots to make this automized SR connection. It's creating a real secure, we can call it friendship, although it seems a bit anthropomorphic. But we do understand it intuitively. That's what our friendships are about too. There's certainly more information out about consciousness and sentience in animals, and some people take notice of it, but some are simply not interested in changing their behaviour if it interferes with their pleasures or aims. Look at bullfighting, or behaviour in fairs, or what goes on during or before competition. We have to face it, this is a consumerist, capitalist society dedicated to material self-gratification and egotism, not to empathy. Even people who are genuinely concerned are often poorly informed. The majority of the world now lives in cities with no contact with nature or animals. They get their information from the internet, but they don't have any practical awareness of it. Their lives depend on users' instruction manuals and technological control, much more than getting out and feeling it and developing an intuition and an ability to communicate in that way. That makes, in my opinion, for a lot of confusion in people who want something they're not actually equipped to get without an awful lot more training. Clearly, from our point of view, the horse's major role is simply to do whatever we want, to fulfill whatever role we want. And we want different things. Here's a load of figures. But we could also learn a lot from them, especially from their society. How to foster a more egalitarian society where you can have different roles, but nobody's really more important than anybody else. And nobody has the right to impose themselves on others, force them to do things, and take away their ability to satisfy their own needs. Horses aren't interested in accumulating symbols of their own importance. They're interested in getting along together and completing their responsibilities, which they're very responsible about. They let others get on with their responsibilities and simply want to enjoy life to the full by promoting their positive emotions. societies aren't designed, they just grow. They evolve, if you like, according to internal and external pressures. At the moment, our overwhelming problem is coexistence with the planet itself and with each other, for respect for nature and respect for each other. We've got pretty severe problems about mental health. This is a sick society, especially in children. These are problems brought on by just thoughtlessness, failure to give priority to what people and animals really need. It's a kind of worship of false idols. Our treatment of horses just reflects that. If we could make a better society, then we'd treat horses better. We could encourage concrete solutions as examples, and perhaps have more legislation simply to forbid bad ones. For instance, we might, especially in Spain, use more abandoned mountain land. It's been abandoned because of the fall of demand for meat. And put horses on it and let people come and interact with them, maybe in centres or something, places they could stay, watch them, understand what they're really about, interact with them, draw conclusions from them, immerse themselves in nature a bit, and the horses would actually be reducing fire risk. Legislation, how about banning horses being kept 24 hours in stables? People are seeing the damage that it's doing to them because of our confinement here, and people are feeling the effects of confinement too because of this virus. So let's extend that with a bit of empathy. Firstly, although the internet is a wonderful source of information, it's also a source of misinformation and subject to commercialism, all sorts of things. So we need reliable sources of information, and starting off with basic guidelines about keeping and treating horses as conscious and sentient beings capable of suffering. ICES, the International Society for Equitation Science, has put out basic rules on learning theory. They're a bit limited. They don't talk much about consciousness, sentience, or cognitive behaviour, but at least you can teach a horse stop and go properly. Kobe Bolger's put out a list of 10 basic ideas about nutrition, and she's also exploring ways of managing small bits of land with too many horses on them, so that we can actually not contribute to global warming in creating little tiny deserts all over the place. And we can also create a healthier intestinal flora that helps horses stay healthy mentally and physically. Jane Mayer's Equiculture does the same. We could have channels where the most recent simple research about behaviour is coming through, so that there's no argument about it. There's one called The Horse that does it, but it's in English, where scientific papers are just translated into language and conclusions that people can understand. I think that would be a huge help, but who's to bell the cat? Secondly, we really do need a radical revision of official courses for riding school instructors and monitors, trainers, what's called equestrian tourism, trekking, trainers and judges. It's really imperative, and it's way overdue. We're using ideas that sprung up 150 years ago, and they just haven't been revised. The vast majority of riding school horses are in severe pain, and boy, you can see it from the way they move. That's not even recognised by monitors. I've got all the references later, don't worry about that. Because the professionals are not taught to recognise it. That's appalling. We haven't revised things to meet the needs of people who live in modern sterile cities and think communication is sending coded messages. It's not about using observation to guide you to what could be an appropriate response to the other side, you know? I'm not saying riding is about giving you the instructional manual. Do this, do that, do the other, and if it doesn't work, just hit the horse. I'm not saying that all riding schools are bad, don't people get offended, but the most of them are absolutely appalling, actually. The situations places where cruelty and ignorance are promoted. And what you see in competition is often not an awful lot better. There's an awful lot of pain and outright brutality towards horses that is simply not stopped. Where are we to go when our teachers and the people we're taught to admire are leading us in the wrong direction? We know more now, let's change it. And the third thing is there are far too many horses. They're usually brought up in conditions that are pretty much guaranteed that they won't be healthy, and they won't be emotionally stable, and they won't be sociable, and they'll die pretty early. There's a study that shows that sports horses in Sweden have an average life expectancy of 14 years. That's average. Yeah. So couldn't we have some maybe imposed control of who can breed and how horses are to be bred, so that they will lead decent, healthy, happy lives? I hope this has helped to reflect a bit on what welfare is, and thank you for listening.